Hi, everybody. This is Lee Andrews, and I am Aquent Studios Federal Vice President. And it is my honor today to introduce Brent Northam. He has helped our organization and helped so many companies in industry and now in government adapt and the ways of Agile, not just within the technology component, but also within marketing and creative. And that's what he's on this call to do today, is to help us, connect those dots between iterative design within marketing and creative and Agile. So Brent, I'm going to turn it over to you. And having known Brent for 18 years, you're in very good hands. So Brent, to you.
Hi, folks. Thanks very much, Lee. Thanks, Vicki. Let's see. So let's get started. We're going to talk about Agile and creative teams. Just a little bit more about who I am. I'm the Director of Software Development at Aquent in our Staffing Technology Group. I'm a software guy with lots of crossover experience working with our marketing teams and creative teams as well. So I've experienced, been a part of, helped lead an Agile, Agile transformation, have coached other teams in their journey as well, and had the benefit and honor of learning much of what I came to understand about Agile from Ken Schwaber, who's the founder of one of the main Agile methodologies called Scrum. So over the years that I've been involved in Agile, we've created and led cross-functional teams across different departments in not only pure technology realms, but also in digital marketing efforts, marketing technology implementations, and that sort of thing. So in a typical year, I'm involved in working with our team members, product managers, and all these other people in producing 8 to 12 new initiatives at Aquent per year to help benefit our clients and job seekers. So that's me. Today, what I'm here for is to help you think about whether or not you should consider shifting to Agile approaches within your PR or marketing or creative team. So I'm hoping that when you leave this webcast, that you'll feel armed with the information that you need to go back to your group and start thinking about, is this something we should really pursue? Should we reach out and get more information and see if we can make our organization more effective by using these ideas? So as Vicki mentioned at the beginning of the call, I'll walk through some of these thoughts and pause a couple times during the webcast in case you have questions along the way. So some of the topics that I want to get to, what is Agile? It's obviously a buzzword in a sense, and so I think I want to dig down more deeply a little bit into what does it really mean and why did it come to exist? I want to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned, I'm a software guy, right? So why isn't Agile just for software development? What makes this relevant to creative organizations? Agile's a cure-all, right? So we'll talk about some of the misconceptions about Agile along the way and the right and wrong ways to think about Agile. And then we'll dig down into what are the core principles. You can talk about practices and procedures and steps and adoption methods a lot, but until you really internalize the core principles of Agile, you're not going to have as much success. So we'll cover that. And in the end, why should you consider how you work? Are there ways that your team is working inefficiently, ineffectively, that you think indicate to you that maybe considering a change is where you want to go? So those are our topics. Let me start off with what is Agile and why does it exist? So really, Agile is simply a way to make our work product meet our customer needs more faithfully and more quickly. So it uses techniques that focus the effort that we put forward in our jobs on the customer value. And we use self-motivated, self-organizing teams to achieve that value. So Agile came to exist because of the alternatives to those approaches, failed projects and cost overruns. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that in depth here in a moment. But the why of why teams seek change with Agile is that across industries, across different types of projects, right? Projects take too long, are over budget, and don't meet expectations way more often than we think. Process overhead is a huge component of the overall spend. Your team is working on tasks that aren't actually contributing to the end result. Turnover and burnout on the team, the long slog, the task management. These things happen when teams aren't happy and when they're not achieving well. And it can impose a really big cost on your organization, not just in in finding more great new folks to fill out the team when turnover happens, but because people who aren't engaged and don't feel like they have an ownership stake in the work that they're doing, aren't going to be as productive for you over time. And then no improvement over time. So one of the things that Agile really focuses on when we get to the principles is not just doing things better, but doing things better than last time. And it's really easy to get into a pattern of steady operational work where you're not focused, you're not taking the time to look back, self-examine, and figure out how do we change this so that we can improve over time. So teams that have these issues, are ripe for thinking about Agile as a different approach. But isn't it for software development? So, Agile did originally come around as a solution for failed software development projects, and I say failed because there were studies done, in the 80s and 90s that tried to measure things against against success metrics when it came to software development. So obviously software was an emerging and new industry throughout that time period. And they found that overwhelming numbers of software development projects were, in retrospect, could be considered failures. Either they did not meet the expectations of their customers, or they were over budget or behind schedule. Now, software development actually, it turns out, as the industry started to adopt some of these practices, people started to realize that the same issues, the same opportunities, existed in marketing and creative organizations. And so within the past 5 years, there's been a lot of parallels recognized between the kinds of work that creative teams and marketing teams do and the ways in which they can impact their success in the same ways that software and technology teams can, using the same philosophy. So between software and marketing, creative, and PR, there's a lot shared about how success comes about. Time to market is important in both pursuits. Getting something great out in front of folks faster means you have a better chance to react. You have a better chance to capture a market segment. Responding to change. The world is moving so fast at a technical level, technology level, but also in terms of messaging. When you're doing projects that are 6 or 9 months long, or even 3 or 4 months long, by the end of that time cycle, the world is often quite a bit different than it was when you started. Team productivity and happiness, right? Our teams are human beings with amazing ingenuity and creativity, and unless that is unleashed, unless those teams are able to provide value outside of their specific job description, then they're going to feel pigeonholed into something that they don't love as much because they're not helping to contribute to success. So that's true in marketing, it's true in creative, it's true in software. Working on the most impactful things can really drive success. So what I mean by that is, if you look at all of the tasks your teams perform, and you really start to think about what are the minimum viable product that we can create? What is the most value for our organization, for our customer, you start to realize that you've been doing a lot of work that isn't directly focused on them. And so being customer-centric and understanding what is the eyeballs, who are the folks out in the public or in sister organizations or in companies that are going to be consuming what we're creating, and centering on their needs and how it is that we're communicating with them is, again, a shared metric of success. Data-driven results and failing fast. So failing fast is so important in software development and also in the marketing and creative pursuits, because you need to be able to try new ideas, crazy ideas sometimes. You need to be able to see, without huge investments, is this something that could work? Now, you can do lots of crazy ideas and small ideas without Agile, but Agile really focuses on measuring the outcomes of those. Because unless you know if they're really going to be successful and you plan in advance to know how to measure its success, then you will again begin to build things or execute campaigns that aren't going to hit home. And success depends on continual improvement. So again, back to what I was saying in the earlier slide, no matter what your team's performance is or what goals they're hitting at any particular time, your key measure of success should be whether or not that metric or that goals are increasing over time. So here's something that came out this year from Forbes Agency Council, kind of reiterating the movement of the Agile thought processes into the Agile marketing and creative spaces from the technology space. And they, they're mentioning here that, yeah, Agile is an important part of an ever-evolving technology-shaped business infrastructure, right? So good marketers and agencies want to be held accountable. They want to know if they're impacting numbers. They hope to learn as often and quickly as possible what is working and what isn't, and are willing to adjust course to steer through success. So if that sounds familiar to you, you're already in a really great place. And I think as you look more and more into other marketing organizations across industries, this is becoming much more common. So what kind of results can you expect? I have no idea. It is different on every single team. It differs on what kind of thing what kind of product you're actually producing. Is it digital marketing campaigns or public relations efforts? But I can tell you my experience here at Aquent. When we started engaging in trying to take on some of these ideas and changing our processes, changing the way our teams thought about their work and how the executive group started thinking about prioritizing work to focus on the customer value, we went from producing 1 to 2 major products per year to 10 to 12 products per year. So we had massively reduced timelines down from 9, 12 months down to 6, 8 weeks or 4 weeks even in certain cases. Continually releasing campaigns and improvements in digital marketing efforts as well, instead of these month-long efforts. So it made a really huge impact in my experience here at Aquent as well. Another thing is concurrency. So when you have much smaller, focused, effective projects, you end up being able to execute more of them at a time. So this will obviously depend on team size and the structure of your departments, but in our group, we were able to really focus on one big thing at a time in the past, and now we're able to focus on 3 or 4 concurrent efforts, which gives us even more chance to try out new things, and for some of those things to fail, and for us to learn from them, and for some of them to be great successes. So other impacts or outcomes of our transition to Agile and the transitions that I've participated in is that we managed to no longer build what we said we would build at the beginning, no longer produce the exact campaign that we designed at the beginning, but instead, through the Agile processes, learn and progressively elaborate that over time to ensure that we created what was needed in the marketplace. We were able to engage with our teams and allow for new ideas to emerge that wouldn't have been thought of otherwise had we not freed up people to think outside their particular role. We were able to spend way less time on invaluable work, and instead direct those folks in a way that, again, they were very focused on the business value and the customer's needs. And we're able to cause department boundaries to fade away. When you start thinking more about what's the group of people necessary to solve this problem, you have to stop thinking as much about job titles and about department membership, and more about who's the group of people who can really achieve this together. And we were able to achieve early failure. Failure is one of those things that over time, if you can figure out a way to celebrate failure, you can tell that the mindset has changed. You don't want failure all the time, of course, but failure is one of the best ways to learn. If you look, at incubators in California, startups, for example, they throw giant failure parties for first-time entrepreneurs sometimes, because they know that that's one of the stepping stones to really getting it right. So that means that this can fix everything, right? So not quite. I'm going to go into a little some of the fallacies and some of the ways that Agile might not be able to fix those problems, or an ineffective transition to Agile might fail to achieve those results. But before I do it, Vicki and Lee and for the group here, are there any questions before we move on to this?
No, sir, not yet.
Okay. Okay, so there's lots of things that aren't Agile. I mean, the traditional one, right, is big plan up front. So you might call this waterfall. And waterfall has its place in the world. I wouldn't recommend, and I think it's probably not a great idea to build a Mars lander so much without a very detailed, carefully thought out plan with all the processes that you might need to go into something that is sustaining human life. But big plan up front is not Agile because it assumes that you know everything at the beginning. Agile in name only. This is interesting, and I've seen this in other teams where where people adopt an Agile label, and they say that they're doing Agile, but haven't really thought about the philosophies, haven't thought about the principles enough. They're really going through the motions. So Agile is not a process so much, right? So Agile I call a practice, but a process implies that there are a number of steps that you should take one after another in order to achieve Agile success. And it doesn't really work that way. It's a little bit fuzzier and relies more on the human intellect and the enthusiasm of your teams. Agile is not strictly just project management either. I don't think you can necessarily send off your project manager for Agile training and come back and tell everybody, okay, now we're going to do Agile. That might be part of a program in your transition, but Agile is not just about what a project manager does. It's about how a team interacts together, builds trust, comes to share common goals, and then makes the decisions necessary to achieve the outcomes that they want. It's not a cure-all. I think, when teams start off, and I speak of personal experience, it may on certain teams seem incredibly different, incredibly slow, incredibly frustrating to change the way that you work in such huge ways. And initially, you're not going to get the results that I mentioned earlier in this webcast, right? The power of Agile comes in introspection and learning and continually fighting to get better. It's not a new series of rules. So I know you might have a handbook, or you might have training materials on how we execute campaigns in my department. How do we create blog posts? How do we interact with the general public? You may have a very set of specified rules. Agile's not, you're not going to find on the internet or with any consultant that you might hire or with me a new handbook or a different set of step-by-step rules. Instead, you have to be more human-focused in terms of how it is you're going to achieve this success. We'll talk about how here in a few moments. So methodology labels are not Agile. There are lots of methodology labels. Here are some of them. These came out of software development world as well, but many of them have crossovers into the marketing and creative space, including Kanban and Lean and Scrum. So these are specific methodologies that you might adapt in order, because you believe that they, they embody the Agile principles the best, and they provide guidance for your team. But having a label and being able to call your team something, is really not the outcome that you're looking for. So don't worry too much about the labels. Agile's not consistent. So when I first worked with folks, both inside and outside our organization, to try to achieve this transition for Aquent, it was overwhelming. There are so many different things to learn and do differently. Just thinking differently about your job as a whole takes a lot of effort, and it's a big mind shift. So when it came down to it, we began to wonder, how do we know we're doing it right? Is there something for us to measure against? A question to ask ourselves to know whether or not we are proceeding down this Agile path in a way that's going to help us be successful. And the expert that I was working with at the time said, there's lots of things you could look at, lots of things you could measure. The thing that's most important is that you are retrospecting and your team is sharing ways to get better over time. And so on my team, and when I hold talks like this and train new folks on Agile processes, I find that every time I do that, the materials that I use to help do that training are wrong. And they're wrong because our Agile processes are, the way in which we're executing our work is different than it was 6 months ago. And that's been true for the last 7 or 8 years as we've learned and changed and modified and become more efficient over time. So it's not a consistent process. It's a process that should continue to change as you grow. So now let's get into the core principles. There is a thing out there called the Agile Manifesto, and I'll show it to you in a second. As I mentioned before, in the software development industry, when they began to realize or publicize the fact that so many software development projects were failures, a group of folks got together, I think in Snowbird, Utah in 2001, and their goal was to write down their ideas about how to make this better. And they came up with something called the Agile Manifesto. It's a series of guiding principles against which each of those methodology labels adopted to try to help achieve the end goals they were looking for. And that became a wild success in the software development industry. Today, if you meet candidates who are looking to join software engineering jobs, product management, or user experience jobs, almost all of them have some exposure to Agile development practices. It's spread like wildfire throughout that industry. The same thing has started to be true in marketing, as I mentioned from the Forbes article before. In the last 5 years, that's become more and more prevalent. And so I think in 2012 or so, folks started to adopt this Agile Manifesto to try to more faithfully capture the unique aspects of marketing or creative pursuits in the spirit of Agile. So they wrote this, and I'll share some of it with you. We're discovering better ways of creating value for our customers and other organizations through new approaches to marketing. Through this work, we have come to value the following, and here are the key points. We value validated learning versus opinions and conventions. So you may have always done certain things the same way. You may have a very strong opinion that a certain campaign should be structured in this way. But the thing that makes you more and more successful is if you begin to value validated learning, having actually seen the impacts and tested them in the real world. Customer-focused collaboration versus silos and hierarchy. So making decisions based on job titles is going to get you a less useful outcome in an Agile practice than if you figure out a way to get your target audience, your customer, in the room, either virtually or in real life. There are best practice Agile teams out there who have managed to get their customer sitting with their groups multiple times a day or a week, either in video conferences or co-located. So collaborating with your end customer directly is always going to get you a better end result than assuming you know what they want. the process of customer discovery versus static prediction. So guessing at what the customer wants, again, is not going to get you the same outcomes. Flexible versus rigid planning. We'll talk a little bit more about project plans in a moment, but the ability to change your mind and celebrate that ability is so key to your success when adopting Agile principles. You have to not only plan for change to happen, but plan to change on purpose. You have to build in the idea that you know the decisions you make now are going to change once you know more down the line. Responding to change versus following a plan. So not only are you going to learn more as you create something and as your customer reacts to it, but because you're using such an iterative approach, things that change in the world are going to be things you can react to more easily. Whether it is, I know in the software world, we may get new legislative requirements, we may have new market conditions, we may see an opening and competitive advantage that we can capture if we only do it right now and can beat our customer to the punch. All of those things become very difficult to do if what I committed to on March 1st is in the way of me making the choice or our team making the choice to pursue that new changed environment. Performing many small experiments versus a few large bets. So you can go for large projects, large campaigns, but they should be informed by your actual knowledge about how well they're going to do based on small experiments. This thing A/B testing is quite mature now, and so that it's expanded even beyond that. And I remember hearing from someone at Amazon how they were able to test tiny little changes in the way that their shopping cart worked to millions of people hundreds of times a day, and they were able to gather massive amounts of data so that they knew what worked best. Not all of us are going to have that benefit of that huge volume of small experiments, but every time you can get something in front of a customer and measure the impact, measure the success of it with minimal investment, that can make you more and more confident in the investments that you make later on, with larger projects. Okay, so in practice, what does all of that mean? These are all of the principles that we should follow, but in reality, when you start to put together an Agile approach in your team, what's going to be different? Well, the first thing is that if you don't already have this, you would want to create small cross-functional teams. Cross-functional in the sense that everybody needed to produce the end result is engage on a day-to-day basis with everyone else. So it doesn't mean that we won't have copywriters and designers and user experience folks and producers and all of the roles that we have today. Those obviously still exist. It means that those people are working together with a shared focus and a shared set of goals. You need to give that team the space and authority they need to get the job done. So it becomes really different when you have a team and you hand them an opportunity instead of hand them a project. What are we trying to achieve? We are trying to achieve a 10% customer satisfaction increase in the folks that are interacting with our website. And you say, that's what we're trying to achieve. And here are some ideas. And give that team the authority they need in order to turn that into real product that helps achieve that goal. So you're going to progressively elaborate your work and rely on your team to work out the details. So we're not going to hand a team a giant requirements document. We're, again, going to give them the flexibility to understand this is the scope of the work that we're trying to do. This is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We know that you are skilled, creative people who care about your job, who care about having to come up with a great outcome. Go do it. When all the details are specified up front, there's no work for people to do. There's no creativity. You're not going to get the best ideas coming out of that team. You're going to build in success metrics from the start. So we talk about success metrics all the time, but unless you really think about at the very outset, what is it that we're trying to change? Which metric are we trying to move the needle on? And how are we going to measure it? then you may be operating in an agile way and having these great teams that are doing really creative work, but you're not going to improve over time unless you can look back at those metrics and understand whether or not you're meeting the mark. And you're going to break down work into meaningful chunks. So in a best case on an agile team, you're not trying to build everything until it's done at the end. You're trying to provide as much value as you can to your end customer in the smallest possible increments that are meaningful to them. So there's lots of other things that are going to be different if you go down this path. In a best case, you're going to schedule and commit to work in short time boxes. Your team knows how much they can get done in a certain amount of time. If you meet regularly within your team and you say, this is what we're going to try to achieve, this is the value, the business value that we are going to try to give to this customer within the next 2 weeks, that really focuses your team and allows you to do longer term planning. You're going to rapidly prototype and get feedback from real users. So things like wireframes and interim designs are super, super helpful. And I can tell you, I've seen team members on my team here where in the past, the process would have been, go build the entire product and then let's show it to quality assurance, let's show it to our business leaders and see how they like it. By that time, we've taken weeks and weeks and weeks of work. When we really internalized and started adopting Agile processes, that process changed into something that was more like, point at the screen and tell me, is that what you mean? Or did you mean something else? And so you've changed in a huge number of assumptions and mistakes that may take 4 or 6 weeks to accumulate to literally a 30-second video chat screen sharing session between team members to eliminate all of the misconceptions or ways that it's hard to communicate meaning. So rapidly prototyping and getting feedback from real users just intensifies the kind of value you can get out of your team because you remove huge amounts of time spent on the wrong work. So you build small, complete pieces. If you need a newsletter and the newsletter has 15 different features and calls to action and blog posts that are put at the bottom and footers and different branding things, consider doing it in the simplest possible way first and seeing. You may discover that actually ends up meeting all of the goals that you're trying to meet, that naturally you've already agreed on within your team at the beginning of your time box. So think about building complete things in small pieces instead of building all of the complete pieces and putting them together at the end. Involve the target user as often as you can. As I mentioned before, if you can get somebody who's actually going to be consuming your marketing or PR or communications pieces, if you can get somebody who's your real target audience to actually be on your team, you're just going to end up with a much better project. And a lot of times you can convince folks to participate at that level by showing them how much better the outcome is going to be if they can invest a little bit of their time with you along the way. Use retrospectives to continually improve. So if you've never sat in a retrospective, it's the opposite of a postmortem. A postmortem is a meeting I never want to go to, right? Everybody sits around a table, head down a little bit, everybody's kind of quiet. Somebody's in charge of leading the team through finding who is at fault for the problem that happened. And so sometimes you have to examine and understand what's the core cause of this failure. And that's very important. But if you consider that in terms of a retrospective, you get to do that in an entirely new collaborative way that focuses not only on what did we not do as well as we wanted to do, but also on what did we do great on? What went well? Let's talk about that. Let's congratulate ourselves. Retrospectives are a great way to ensure that that Agile principle about continually improving is possible for your team. So to know if you're improving, you have to measure your team. In software development, we use a thing called velocity, but you can make up any number. It doesn't have to be a real number. What you have to come up with is, what was the value we were trying to produce, and did we produce it? Did we exceed it, or did we land under it? And if you're doing things in 2 or 3 or 4 week chunks, you can add it all up and say, we produced 120 amount of value. And last time we only produced 80. And that's a great way of thinking about your team and whether or not you're collaboratively improving over time. So I'll stop here for a second before we talk about the fact that that's crazy. That's no way that's going to work for you. Do we have any questions before I move on?
No, we don't, but we have some points that have been made. Actually, I've been entering them in here, Brent. So
Great.
The one thing that's interesting is that you say plan to change on purpose. Now that's not uncommon for the marketing and creative people. I mean, we change constantly, right? But
absolutely,
what you're talking about is what we would call a campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's like a kind of moment for me when I think about plan to change in a campaign, because there's so many moving parts in a marketing creative campaign.
Yeah.
You know, so it'd be interesting to see how you tackle that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that the key thing, Lee, is to the degree to which you can structure your work such that it's not just building all of the pieces that add up to a full campaign at the end, but figuring out ways to break that campaign into parts that you can start to test in the marketplace. What I found is that ability to learn early on, makes you humble. Because you realize that all of the assumptions, all the great ideas, I mean, that's one of the funnest parts about participating in a marketing campaign is the creative part, right, of coming up with it and thinking about, how are we going to make this impact? What really speaks to our audience? And so there's a lot of folks in the advertising and marketing space who, are experts, who are great ideas people, who are great communicators. Figuring out in the middle of a campaign, let's just think recently, what was it, was it a Pepsi ad, I think, that became such a sort of laughingstock because they invested super heavily in a marketing campaign and realized that they missed the mark, but they didn't have an ability to know it before egg was on their face. So one of the things I think that's important to think about in terms of change is letting go of the idea that you're the expert. Now, we are creative people and love to kind of do this ideation, but hearing what the results are at the earliest possible time in your campaign will allow you to change it and shift based on real world knowledge.
Cool.
So thank you. Yeah. There are so many valid objections, I think, to some of the things I said that I kind of wanted to go over them and talk about, talk about how to handle them. So first of all, Agile at first glance, and I was worried about this too when I was first introduced on it, it sounds like the Wild West. What do you mean?
Brent, you're breaking up a little bit on my end. I don't know if you're breaking up on anybody else's end.
I'll pause here for a moment and just...
Is anybody else experiencing that, or is it just me? It's fine there. Okay, keep going, Brent. It's me.
Okay, sure. So Agile, when you first think about it, you think, oh, okay, we're going to have these teams, and we just let them do whatever they want. We give them, goals, and they, how can we manage that? How can, as a leader or an executive in my department, can I really operate in an environment where things are changing constantly? Well, let me make sure and share that Agile, executing your campaigns in an Agile way does not mean that we don't have a roadmap, that we don't have a long-term vision. In fact, we absolutely owe our leadership a vision and long-term goals. It's how we execute and achieve that vision and long-term goals is where Agile comes into play the most. So long-term strategic planning is not a casualty of Agile. It is different than the methods and processes we use to actually achieve those long-term plans. Now, what about project plans? We all have project plans. We may have project managers who are awesome at making project plans. Gantt charts, Excel spreadsheets. There's lots of project tracking systems. There may be a PMO out there that helps manage your projects. Now, Agile and project plans are at cross purposes for a couple reasons. If you're going to adopt this, you're going to think about your projects differently. So there's some things or opinions that the Agile world kind of has about project plans that play out here. One is that project plans always trail reality. Inevitably, over time, if a project plan is composed as a series of tasks, it will be idealized at the beginning to be, this is how this project should go if nothing happens. The problem is nothing never happens. I mean, something always happens. Project plans take time away from impacting the customer. The more time that you're checking in, I spent X hours on this, I updated this task completeness to 80%, I constructed a report on where we are relative to our baseline. The more time you're working on that, the less time you're working on the reason you were hired in the first place, which is to communicate effectively to your customer. So if you can think about, what are all the things I do on a day-to-day basis that aren't for the benefit of my audience? You start to really come to a different conclusion about how you might be adding value to the team and how the team can be more successful in a shorter amount of time. Project plans reduce our ability to change. You start to think, well, should I do this? Well, the project plan says to. Instead of continually re-examining whether or not it actually is going to contribute to the outcomes that you're hoping to achieve. Project plans are sometimes for control. They're not for success. They're to make orderly work orderly. Now, the more we focus on whether or not we can reduce surprises to zero, the less we are going to focus on whether or not we're actually being effective in achieving our organization's end goals. And project plans ensure, they demand that we lengthen the time and money spent on losing ideas, because a project plan isn't complete until 100% of its tasks are complete. You may have phases, you may have very elaborate, amazing project plans, but nevertheless, you're not going to be done until the end. And unless you can be done on day 2 of something small and done on day 6 of something that has even more value, and done on day 14 of half of the value. That's what you want to try to get to, because you'll be learning and changing your mind along the way. So I'm not a big fan of project plans, even though I went through PMP, project manager training. I probably spent many hours of my life building project plans. I'm afraid, and I apologize to Aquent for the waste of time that it probably was. When you have a project plan, your team is going to be measured against the plan, not the outcomes, and it's going to reduce its ability to contribute in a positive way. Okay, what about, this all sounds great to me, but it's never going to fly with my boss. I don't have any executive support for doing something this radical and changing the way we work. Well, that's true everywhere. When this first starts out. The key is finding the person in your organization, whether it's you, your boss, somebody on your team, who's really accountable for success. And if they're here on this webcast, or if they're familiar with Agile principles, you've already got a leg up. You already know that person might be open to changing the way you think about how you're providing value to the organization. But if not, you got to start small. You got to be under the radar a little bit. You got to demonstrate success. So first focus on educating yourself, educating your team members. If you become passionate about this, right, the next key is to see if you can make other people passionate about it. Learn more online. We've got resources I'll share at the end of the call. But you're going to want to see who on your team. Have you worked at organizations elsewhere that have used Agile approaches? How did it work? You want to start small. It wouldn't make sense at all to roll out Agile over a giant federal department. It would make sense to start with a small team that is, has control or responsibility over a small amount of value over time, because then you can try something out. It's not a huge investment and you don't have to make a huge commitment. The fun part is if you can do that, if you can get your foot in the door, you can start demonstrating success. And that's where you start to gather executive support. You can compare the results. Look, we had this team over here who was empowered to do what they were asked in terms of hitting these metrics, and we have this team over here who's doing things in the traditional way. Let's take time to retrospect on that and talk between those teams and see who is getting, who's enjoying their job more, who's hitting their shared department goals better, and start seeing what that looks like within your group. So executive support comes from success. So why change? Well, I think I've talked a lot about this already, but I wanted to break it down into smaller chunks. Agile can, if it works in your team and it gets going well, you can get more done faster and more effectively than you're doing today. You can lower costs in your organization and increase satisfaction. Lower costs by not doing all the work that doesn't bring value. And increase satisfaction by giving it back to people, the real human part of their job, giving them a way to actually be creative human beings who contribute in a whole way to their organization's success. More folks across industries are now expecting agile approaches in the digital world. If you're recruiting from other organizations into your team, you're going to encounter over and over more folks that have already worked at a place that are using agile techniques. And if they come in and are looking at opportunities on your team and you haven't done that, at least my experience is they're not going to see that very favorably. Most folks, when they start working in an agile organization, really become committed to the feel of how it works, and they hesitate to work in a different kind of organization. There is excitement and energy around expanding these agile ideas throughout organizations. So as I mentioned, this was very strictly a software development type approach for a long time, and as more and more types of work are being looked at that are creative pursuits that depend on the intellects of the team members, the more and more popular the approach is becoming. And frankly, the goal is that your organization can improve its outcomes. I mean, that's what we're shooting for, and that's what we're hoping to get to. So I want to leave you with a couple thoughts. So if any of the following things that I'm about to say sound familiar on your team, well, maybe it's time for you to take a look and see if you want to take the next steps with an agile transition. So if on your team, the business value of our work is not clearly defined, is true, then you may have some work to do. The order of the tasks doesn't matter as long as everything gets done. We don't measure outcomes or don't adjust accordingly. We report progress to our stakeholders, but they're not involved day to day. Our team tries to imagine what our customers want. Our team holds postmortems. There's my favorite meeting. Decisions are made at the top. We do work according to the plan. And we don't measure or try to increase the value we're producing over time. The team calls in sick a lot and comes and goes based on the clock. So anyway, I've heard all of those things, and I'm sure many of you have too. But those are warning signs that you might be in an organization that isn't really extracting the most value and most self-satisfaction from your team. If those things sound familiar, think about educating yourself a little bit more. Taking what we talked about here today, you can go out on the internet. Frankly, just Google Agile marketing, and you'll see a wealth of resources, including the manifesto, agilemarketing.net. I don't have no affiliation with these groups, but I found that they were great resources. Think about training. If you have a continual education program in your organization that allows you to go and get professional development training, see if you want to use that on an Agile career path in terms of becoming an Agile coach or being able to bring ideas back from that training into your team. hire experts, right? It requires sometimes somebody coming in with lots of experience to take a look at your organization and help figure out, what are the, how do we custom design something that fits this particular team? And listen to your teams. You're going to hear, if you start listening hard, people talking about, a wish to work a little bit better. And if your teams are talking about that and they're introspecting, this might be something that you consider. So I'm going to turn it back over. I appreciate everybody's time. I think